Are you ever to learn about every revolution and revolt in the entire human history in the next
12
minutes? That sucks, because I'm about to teach it to you. I'll be your host. John, not like John Green, but something better. I'll be your host, John Kokoska. Let's start off with the first, most important revolution of all time. The Neolithic Revolution. Happening from 8000 to 2000 BCE, depending on where you were, symbolized mankind's transition from hunting and gathering to stone tools and sexism. Many historians mark this as the beginning of human history. This marked the creation of a simple state form and, more importantly, specialists. Specialists are people who use their time and resources to, well, specialize in doing certain tasks for personal gain. So you can thank the Neolithic Revolution for IT guys. Now, it's impossible to totally cover every revolution past this point, so here's an enormous list because humans are freaking violent, man. Alright, up next we got something you probably forgot about. Akhenaten's failed religious revolution. This Egyptian pharaoh attempted to spread his belief in the god Aten as the supreme deity, cloaking temples of other gods and challenging the power and influence of his priests. A lot of people didn't like it, and after his death, they immediately reverted back to the old system. I mean, it's not a huge impact on history. It's a pretty classic example of censorship, I guess. But, the Ionian Revolt. A great uprising of Greeks and other subject peoples on the western frontier who ended loose control of Persian cities. The Persians needed 5 years and a massive infusion of troops and resources to end a revolt, but did eventually squash the revolt and use it as an excuse to invade Greece in 490 BCE. While Greeks and friends had much more influence than Akhenaten, this revolt was one of the first recorded instances of the people lashing out at their government violently. Finally, we're at something that has some really serious historical effects. The Abbasid Revolt. Lasting from 747 to 750 CE. It was a Muslim overthrow, the last Umayyad Caliph, due to a decade of unrest under the Umayyad. The Muslim population was small, but still outnumbered the Arab warriors. The revolt obviously led to the Abbasid Caliphate. The overthrow of the Umayyad, however, ended Arab imperial rule and marked the beginning to a more inclusive, multi-ethnic state in the Middle East. Between the 1400s and the 1700s, three major things happened. I'm talking revolutions that affect the entire world in one way or another. And first off, you've got the Maritime Revolution, one of the first steps to globalization. The Maritime Revolution, led by Spain and Portugal, started with massive advancements in shipmaking technology and a need for a fast ocean trade route between Europe and Asia. This resulted in the discovery of the Americas, and lots of other accomplishments for Europe, including sailing around the tip of Africa and sailing around the entire world. Globalization part is mostly due to the Columbian Exchange, in which native plants and animals were exchanged between Europe and America. This greatly increased European population with the potato, which sounds really funny when I say it quickly like this. However, the Maritime Revolution had some serious downsides. Have you ever heard the phrase, unintended genocide? Not that the genocide wasn't meant to happen at some point, just that it wasn't the intended purpose. Also, imported slavery became a thing. Next, the Scientific Revolution. The Scientific Revolution dawned a new era of understanding of the universe as advancements in physics, astronomy, biology, chemistry, and math helped transform views of nature. Scientists like Isaac Newton and Francis Bacon proved theories that would also weaken the influence of the church. The child of the Scientific Revolution was a spread of philosophical ideas with the invention of the printing press, known as the Enlightenment. Philosophers like Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Voltaire formed ideas about natural rights, the goals and purposes of government, and separation of church and state. The Enlightenment can be credited for many future revolutions. Alright, next up we have...
After the 7 Years' War, the British needed to gain revenue to repay war efforts and launched the Stamp Act. The colonies were upset, not only due to the act, but also due to them having zero representation in Parliament to detest the act. Britain kept building up unrest, and the colonists formed the Continental Congress, most famous for writing the Declaration of Independence. In May 1775, local militiamen clashed with British soldiers in Lexington and Concord, beginning the American Revolutionary War. The American Revolution successfully brought the colonies out of monarchy and into one of the first successful constitutional democracies. The American Revolution was incredibly important because it symbolized a shift to Enlightenment ideas and inspired countless other countries to also rebel against their terrible leaders. Just like our next revolution taking place in France. You may know this one, obviously, if you've existed on Earth for any period of time. France in the late 18th century declared bankruptcy due to its incredibly flawed method of tax collection, and famines riddled the country. King Louis XVI called an emergency States General, which the third estate, inspired by the Continental Congress of the American Revolution, decided to become its own national assembly due to massive injustice or lower class. They would not stop their cause until French Constitution was put in place. The third estate raided the Bastille and fought back and established the Declaration of Rights of Man. The royalty did nothing to help the cause, provoking commoners and denying aid for hungry mothers. Austria and Prussia didn't want revolutionary ideas making into their countries, so they blocked off the French entirely. Eventually, Louis and Marie Antoinette realized all was lost and made a getaway for the border, but recaptured due to using the money with their own faces on it. This led to the terror in which people were executed left and right, because if you kill the king, you can kill anyone. The French Revolution ended with... Where is he? Oh, there he is, down there. Anyways, the French Revolution ended with Napoleon getting the throne, but France's troubles weren't over yet. Haitian Revolution. Haiti was set into four castes. The white plantation owners on top, wealthy freemen on the island, poor whites, and slaves. By the 19th century, slaves made up 90% of the entire Haitian population. In 1789, the people of Haiti received word of the French Revolution and the Declaration of the Rights of Man. This caused unrest between the two races of the island, intensified as the National Assembly in 1971 gave citizenship to all free men of color. This led to fighting between the rich whites and the rich blacks, only to be dwarfed by the slave revolt which broke out as a result. To Saint Louverture. Oh my god, did I really just say? A former slave helped mold the slaves into a disciplined army that could stand up to French troops. The Spanish, whom had clashed with France in the past, supported the slave revolt and supplied them with weapons and training. Soon after, the British invaded Haiti and joined forces with the slave rebellion, and France realized it could not afford to fight two countries in a slave rebellion, so it freed the slaves. Louverture immediately switched sides and helped the French fight off the British and Spanish, and in doing so steer the colony towards independence. However, Napoleon took over in 1799 and aimed to retake France's American colonies, most of which were lost in the 7 Years' War. In order to do this, he needed to tax the island. The best way to do that, he thought, was to reintroduce slavery. He captured and jailed Louverture, who died in prison. The Haitian fight for independence was not entirely credited to actual fighting, however, as yellow fever also played a major role. The Haitians won their independence, and France was also unable to get back their colonies, leading to the Louisiana Purchase. Next up, we got something really big again. We got the Industrial Revolution. Starting in Britain, marked a change from farming and specialization to factories and assembly lines. This shift noted a change in conditions, as people moved to the cities and people were incredibly closely packed. Populations and deposits littered the streets, and rivers and bodies piled all over towns. However, industrialization gave countries a much higher advantage, due to them being able to produce weapons and supplies much more quickly. The revolution changed the entire way of life for the entire world, and changed warfare in its entirety. Now, Latin America is kind of weird because it's multiple revolutions, but one guy comes along and tries to make it one revolution that happens in multiple parts to become one solid nation, but it doesn't work. I'm talking like, in 1810, the rich white peninsulars of the colonies ruled an iron fist, and inspired by revolutions that had taken place in America, France, and Haiti, Simón Bolívar emerged as a leader for Venezuelan revolutionaries. He helped declare independence for Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador, and planned to merge them into a single nation, much like the United States Union of States, but failed miserably due to the diverse and varied cultures of the new countries. The new governments established were weak and quickly descended in political chaos.
Mexico's independence went similarly, with the Crayoles being led by Miguel Hidalgo, a priest who urged people it was the will of God to overthrow Spain's rule. Even after Hidalgo's capture and execution, his followers ended the Spanish rule and established independence. By 1823, Mexico was a steady republic. By 1916, Russia was in a state of emergency, with a poorly equipped military, lack of ammunition, fuel, food, and a collapsing economy. In March 1917, the Tsar was overthrown and replaced with a provisional government led by Alexander Kerensky. On November 6, 1917, Vladimir Lenin's Bolsheviks staged an uprising in Petrograd and overthrew the provisional government, so things were going great for Russia. By 1921, the Communists had defeated most of their enemies, and by 1922, the Soviet Republic of Ukraine and Russia emerged to create the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. But Joseph Stalin was a skillful administrator who rose within the Communist Party and used his power to lead the nation. He set about the task of industrializing the Soviet Union in such a way as to increase the power of the Communist Party domestically and to increase the power of the Soviet Union in relation to other countries. In 1928, Stalin set in motion a series of 5-year plans that were designed to achieve ambitious goals by instituting centralized state control of the economy. Under the 5-year plans, the Soviet Union achieved rapid industrialization, accompanied by the kind of environmental change that was experienced by the United States and Canada during their period of industrialization several decades earlier. Stalin urged the peasantry to produce enough food to distribute throughout the country. However, in doing so, he killed 5 million people after 2 consecutive years of bad harvests. Stalin could only pull off all this using extreme force using the military. Russia employed the NKVD, the Russian secret police, in order to create a state of terror. However, Stalin's intense and brutal methods successfully industrialized the Soviet Union faster than other country.
Comrade, steel production is down. I said, comrade, you must sleep on the ground. I said, comrade, cause you're in the gulag. There's no need to be capitalist.
In 1966, Communist leader Mao Zedong became known as the Cultural Revolution, where he restored the authority of the Chinese government. He shut down his schools, calling for a massive youth mobilization to take down current party leaders in their embrace of overseas values and lack of revolutionary spirit. In the months that followed, the movement escalated quickly as the students formed the Red Guard and attacked and harassed members of China's elderly and intellectual population. Many cities reached anarchy by 1917 when Mao had Lin Shaokoi send army troops in to restore order. This caused the economy to plummet, and Zhou Enlai took the reins and restored education, and Deng Xiaoping restored the country to order. The revolution proved the impossibility of a perfect communist state. In Iran, American backing and the corruption and inefficiency of Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi's regime stimulated popular resentment. In 1979, street demonstrations and strikes toppled the Shah and brought a Shiite cleric, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, to power. The overthrow of Ben Ali and the establishment of an anti-Western conservative Islamic Republic in Iran were blows to American prestige, but the United States was unable to do anything about it. In the fall of 1980, Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein invaded Iran to topple the Islamic Republic. The United States supported Iran at first, but then in 1986 told to support Iraq. This is significant because it was only like 3 decades ago. This is your director, these were your researchers, and this person wrote the script. Just kidding, the entire thing is ad-libbed. Who cares about this dude? Once again, my name is John Kokoska.